Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Illustrator by Eduonix Technologies. In this lecture we're going to be going into type in depth. This is a two-part video. We're going to be covering the most basic forms in this part, and we're going to go into some of the more advanced type features in the next one. So here I have my simple yet very informative sentence. It's in pixel preview, so I'm going to turn that off. Later on in the tutorials I'll show you how to change default settings like that. So what I have here is an example of a line of type. There's different ways you can put type into things. I'm going to go into that first since we just studied objects. First thing to note though is the type tool, and I'm going to keep that open over here just so you can take a look at it as I'm explaining some of the basic stuff before we get started into this panel. So this is a line of type. You also have the option in Illustrator of creating type in a box. So this would represent what you would do if you were trying to curve text around an image, and I'm going to place another box here that would represent an image. Just an example, just pretend that this is something that you want to contour your text around. Now I've created my text box, and the text will fill out this shape. So with the text tool, I'm going to want to drag it over here, and if you notice, if I drag it, or if I hold my mouse cursor up towards the corner or the sides or anywhere, it'll turn into a dotted circle. That means that that's going to fill the shape that I click on. And change this to a smaller size so you can see it better, so you can see it curve around more. And let's just type some gibberish. As you can see, it curves around the shape and it contours to the inside of the box. I'm going to turn -A off in paragraph. Basically, turning this off will change the formatting of the words, but if you don't want hyphens, which is generally the most desirable thing, turn this off and then format your text. Let's go back to this. The difference between this text and this essentially is that this is on a line, although it's not an editable line because the way I got it was just taking my text tool and clicking. And by the way, this little dot, the anchor point, is where you click. Wherever you click, it'll form the anchor point and it'll form the text in relation to the anchor point, as you can see. So there's also drawing out a box with the text tool. We'd use this when we just need a simple box. We don't need to curve it around anything. As you can see, it pretty much obeys the same rules as this text box down here. It's just that you can drag it out with the actual text cursor. Now about any shape that's filled with text, you can edit the shape while it still has the text in it, and the text will follow and flow with the shape. It's highly recommended to not use diagonal lines, because diagonal lines, and I'll show you real quick, That would be an example where it's okay because the diagonal line is to the left of the text where everything's starting out. But if I made this, for instance, diagonal, it's basically going to just negate that top line of text. So in terms of horizontal lines, you want to keep them generally relatively straight and parallel, but you can achieve cool effects with the side. Now let's take a quick look at the character panel. As you can probably tell what most of these already are, I'm going to explain them anyway. Zoom in here so you can see what each of these does. I'm actually going to need a paragraph too. So, first off is font. You can click this with your cursor and use your scroll wheel to cycle through fonts. And if you want to see a preview of them, just go up to Type, Font, and all of your fonts are listed over here, and you can see a preview of the font before you click it, which is a little bit more convenient than cycling through. Now, if you want your font previews to be a little bit bigger, and I'm sure you do because they're kind of hard to see like that, and that is a very useful tool, you would just go up to Edit or Illustrator if you're on a Mac. You would go to Edit and then down to Preferences and over to Type. And under this you can see I just set it to large a second ago. I had it paused. But you'll have it on medium by default. So if you set it to large, you can see the type is a lot bigger now, and you can actually tell what you're going to get. So those are the two main ways of selecting type. So type in Illustrator is really similar in a lot of ways, aside from the ones I just showed you, like with the type inside of a text box or type inside of a box. It's really similar in a lot of ways to other programs. You have your font size here. You can change this to inches or whatever you want. You have your leading right here, which I'll show you with this paragraph. When I increase the leading, it makes the distance basically between the lines bigger and smaller. Don't worry about kerning because there's a lot of restrictions on it, and you can achieve the same effect with tracking. So when I increase tracking, it increases the distance between the characters, and you don't have to select the whole thing. You can just select a few characters, like if you wanted to space out type. Say I type in 50 for the kerning here. $200, for example. Give it an extra space. That's what that's for. The vertical scaling and the horizontal scaling are pretty self-explanatory, so I'll just show you real quick. I increase the vertical scaling, the letters get taller while they don't get shorter. I increase horizontal scaling, the letters get wider. Another thing you can do with text, with any form of text, however it is, you can transform it. Hit shortcut key E. You can transform this just like it's an object, as you can see, with the exception of doing the any kind of special distorts like this. Now with the text box, you can do the same thing. But you can also increase, just like any shape, the box as if it were a box and not a text container. Like I said, it operates as both an object and a text container. You can even give it a stroke if you want. Now when I have the box selected and just the box, it'll give it the stroke. Now when I have the text selected, it'll give the text a stroke. So it's pretty intuitive and it knows what you're trying to do. Let's look at these bottom options really quick. All caps will change your formatting to all capital letters. Small caps will change it to all small capital letters. Now, if I type a sentence out in small caps, this is what it looks like. Pretty cool for titles and stuff. There's also a superscript, which puts things above like it was an exponent, and subscript, which puts things below like it was a footnote. You'd use one for exponents, things like that, the other for footnotes. The reason to use superscript and subscript instead of just the baseline shift, which I haven't actually explained, this is what baseline shift does. It shifts it according negatively or positively to the current baseline. If I wanted to make this W lower, I would just shift this down. There you have that. The reason why you would use subscript instead of baseline shift is because it's specifically formatted to a very specific amount baseline shift, an amount of text shrinkage that corresponds to the common usage of exponents. It's made for that specific purpose. And the reason why I would use subscript is the exact same thing, just for what subscript's used for. I could simulate that with baseline shift if I wanted to get something more specific, if I wasn't satisfied with how it looked, but they basically do the same thing. But this is for the quick version, and when you want to be sure it's standard. And then you have your standard underline and your standard strike through. Now we're not going to get into the rest of these, but one last thing I forgot to mention is, of course, certain fonts. Myriad's a good example because it's a common font. Some of the more developed fonts have a lot of options here. And generally Illustrator is going to rank them from the lightest weight to the heaviest weight. So what you'll normally see is condensed, where it condenses everything. It squishes it together. Basically, it lowers the tracking like this, but it's built into the font. And instead of lowering the tracking yourself, you'll want to use condensed if it's available, because it's actually a different font, different characters altogether. Condensed italic, you know what that does. There's bold condensed, just a bold version of condensed. Bold condensed italic, regular, which is the default for most things. It is also called Roman, and it might also be called 55. Boldness has numbers. For instance, light is 35 or 45, regular is 55, semi-bold is 65, bold is 75. I believe black is 85, but it goes in that order. And black is like the extra bold version of bold. So you have your semi-bold, and then you have bold. And just assume that black is just a little bit thicker than this. Now you want to use bold instead of putting a stroke on things unless you absolutely have to. For instance, I can make this a little bit bolder by putting a stroke on it. But I want to use black because, or bold, because this is an actual font. These are actual characters, and they're made specifically to look this way. So the last option here I want to show you is character rotation. Pretty self-explanatory on that one too. If you set this, of course, to 90 degrees, you'll get vertical type. And I can always, of course, change this however I want, because type objects act as regular objects. So let's show you some more kinds of type options that you can do. One of the most useful is type on a path. You're frequently going to want your type to follow a curve or an arc, and the best way to do that is to use type on a path. I've created my path. Now, when I go in with my type tool, I'm going to see several different kinds of cursors. This one means that it's going to start typing on the path. When I move it away, you can see it turns back into a normal text cursor. So I'm going to click right here. Now there's some more cursors to keep in mind. first let's type something out. Change this back to 0. So right now it's typing on the top. You might encounter it where it types and flips it. And I want to show you how to fix that. There's also a lot of other options here. If you go to type and then type on a path, you have a few options here, but you can play with those on your own. You'll see pretty quickly what they do. Let's get into type on a path options. If I flip this, as you can see, it makes it as if it's typing on the other side. Align to path ascender, align to path descender, center, and baseline, which is the default. They all determine in relation to the path where your text is going to be. Generally want to keep it on baseline. I personally have never moved it from that. And then for spacing, you just have different spacing options. This essentially does the same thing as tracking. So let's actually take a look at some of these effects just so you can see them. The reason why I don't use these effects in particular, aside from stair step when you're using a curved line, by the way, it can come in handy. But I generally like to keep it on rainbow. Let's flip this back because it makes a nice smooth arc. Now, if you do want to change this text later, you can, of course, bring it into envelope distort, and you can achieve a lot of things that way. So we've covered the basic characters and the basic most used type tools. Area type tool, which comes up naturally when you are using your cursor. See, just like that on that pink square down there. If I go to my area type tool, see it's the same cursor no matter where. So you can just use your regular type cursor on that. There's type on a path. Vertical type, it's the last thing I'll show you. It's pretty simple. As you can see, it just types vertically. You have vertical area type, which is the same thing as vertical type but for an area. This you would actually need to click on as opposed to using your type tool. Although there are shortcut keys for it too, and you can program your own. And then there's vertical type on a path tool, which I'm sure you can already imagine what that does. So there you have the basic type tools, and you have the character panel. Get to know them because you're going to be using them a lot in Illustrator.